Yo, let's go.
Yeah, hello.
Welcome.
So I
Hello.
want to talk about the first point. I am actually Christian myself, but I wouldn't say that it's like objectively proven. What's the
Really?
logic behind that?
So I'd make like there's a transcendental argument for God. I think that objectively proves God. Where transcendental proofs are used to prove a starting point or like foundational beliefs, and so we would argue like God is like the necessary foundational belief, without which you couldn't like make sense of science or philosophy or anything.
I would agree that you could probably like objectively prove God, but can you objectively prove Christianity? Like,
Yeah, because it has to do with so is everyone has like starting points. They're called like worldview considerations, and so we argue that if it you have to start with the Bible as your foundation due to like limitations in human knowledge. That without the Bible as your starting point, you couldn't make sense of anything. Like to even debate to make an argument, there has to be certain preconditions that have to be the case to even make an argument or debate, and those preconditions are found in the Bible. So the Bible's like necessary to even debate. So like when anyone even shows up to debate, it's like they're acting as if Christianity's true. So it's a performative contradiction to deny Christianity.
yeah, I guess. But my main thing with Christianity is you kind of need to have faith in it. Like, you can't objectively say that Jesus.
Okay, but didn't the disciples have faith in Jesus was God?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. And then we then have to have faith that what the disciples said was true.
The disciples also had direct evidence that Jesus was God because they witnessed like his resurrection and
Yeah,
miracles.
exactly. But we have to have faith that the disciples are telling the truth about that and that everything's been documented well.
Um, no, because we can prove it objectively. I just proved it. God's revealed himself in human history and creation. If you deny that revelation, that knowledge that comes from God through the prophets, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, if you deny that revelation, then you'll have no like standard of truth. You'll have no objective morality. You couldn't do science because there wouldn't be any like regularity of nature. So if you any non-Christian view is going to be like parasitic on the Christian view. It's unavoidable, whether they admit it or not.
Okay. But I feel like you kind of like dodged the point where, and we have to have faith in the Gospels being genuine in order to believe in Jesus
No,
being God.
I said that faith and objective proof aren't mutually exclusive because the apostles had both.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess they have objective proof about Christianity, but we don't.
No, we do. I gave it to you.
Wait, can you run that back then?
If knowledge, then the Christian God exists. We have knowledge, therefore the Christian God exists. It's a logical argument that proves the Christian God. And I can flesh that out and further as to why the Christian God is necessary for knowledge.
Yeah,
As,
go on.
because like for logical So everyone has a starting point belief. Do you understand that? Everyone has a worldview.
Yeah.
And your worldview has to be able to explain universals. So only Christians are going to have like a concrete universal to which would be necessary for like logic or morals.
Do you not think that could be said as a blanket statement for all religion, though?
What?
Could that not be said for every religion, though?
No,
Why
because
not?
you need the perfect attribute set of the Christian God. Only the Christian God has that attribute set. Like you need a Trinitarian God. He has to always be truth revealing.
Wait, why does it need to be a trinity?
Um, that has to do with like a philosophical problem of the one and the many. You need to solve the one and the many to have knowledge.
Okay.
And Christianity uniquely like can solve that problem with a Trinitarian God. I mean, I could explain that, but it's like it's kind of like philosophically dense to get into that. But basically, like when we look at the universe, we see connections between objects and we see distinctions between objects. Like you and me are both humans, so we're connect. We share a property, but then we're distinct because like you're younger than me or something. So you have a property that's distinct from me. Um, so to have knowledge, the connections between objects and the distinctions between objects need to be real. And for that to be the case, like we need a Trinitarian, like ultimate reality. Because if ultimately everything was just like one thing, there would be no like real distinctions between objects. And if ultimately everything was many things, there'd be no connections between objects. And so we need an ultimate that's like one and many, which is a Trinitarian God.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of why you see like the number three stuff being like repeated a lot in nature
Yeah.
and
I got
seven
a.
as well.
Do you mind if I move on? Like, there's a lot of couple people
Yeah,
requested.
go on.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right.
I want to give priority to people that aren't Christian. I guess. Welcome.
Um, so you're Christian, right? You're the guy that was just arguing for Christianity.
Yeah.
Okay. And you said for there to be an absolute, or for a God to be a God, there has to be something about threes.
Well, you need a You got. Yeah, you need a Trinitarian God.
So okay, what about Norse mythology?
Well, that's. They don't even have a God because their
They
gods are.
do. They have multiple.
Yeah, but they're created beings. They don't have like a uncreated God like Christians.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
They don't.
Yeah, they do. Just like the Greek gods are created from other Greek gods are created from central, just the universe. The universe made the first gods.
Yeah, they
Then those gods made more gods.
they don't have an uncreated being like in Christianity. So they don't have a God. That's what we think of God as the uncreated being. They don't pagan gods don't have that. They have created gods.
Okay. But how does that change the fact that they're gods? If nothing is more powerful than these gods, then it
God
makes them absolute.
God is the creator creature distinction. So God created the universe. The pagan gods did not create the universe. They're just powerful beings that exist in the universe.
Sure. True. But still, in Norse mythology, you have Odin, who is basically the equivalent of God in.
All right. Well, thanks for ignoring everything I'm saying.
No, no, no.
God. Why do these people just ignore me?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So, what I want to focus on is Christianity has been objectively proven. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Right. So everyone has like a starting point belief,
What?
and unless you make the Bible your starting point belief, then you would be like contradicting yourself all
Why
the
does it
time.
have to be the Bible?
Only the Bible provides the necessary preconditions to like make the world intelligible or be able to understand our experience, explain
So,
everything.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. What's the preconditions that the Bible specifically, uh, uh, what's the word, gives?
There's like lots of them. Like so, like we know that our senses and our reason is accurate because God designed it. We know there's order in the world because God like ordains the order to be in the world.
So, order, senses.
Yeah,
What do you mean by sensitive? Do you mean like cognitive function or how we
like
perceive reality?
yeah. So like when we design a bridge mathematically, like an architect, they use math to design a bridge, and then the concepts, the
Okay.
mental categories like align with physical categories into like a 1-to-1 ratio. Like we can track we can track the we have brains that can track the external world, and that only makes sense if God designs it that way. Like it wouldn't randomly it happen to be the case. That doesn't make sense.
So basically, so like it's our ability to understand the fundamental laws of the universe.
um yeah, God is like the most fundamental ultimate thing to reality that if you deny, then nothing will make sense. Like reality falls apart.
Are we sure about that?
Yeah, positive.
Because if I deny God, does that make the Earth flat, or
It
does it
makes
stay round?
it makes all scientific claims unjustified.
So So there's no way I could deny God
No,
and then have scientific claim.
no.
Why?
There'd be a contradiction because God would be necessary for science to be possible. So to use science to say God is false would be a contradiction because you'd be saying the thing. It's like how could I explain this? Like
So,
um,
so if I could, one example I would like to give was like during like the middle century and the 1800s, or not 1800s. I'm sorry, during like the first after the year 1000 type of thing, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, as you would call the church. I'm sure you've heard of. Oh crap! I'm sorry, I'm spacing on names here. Galileo.
yeah,
So the church, as you know, was the one that was teaching that the Earth was flat, and like you know, they were teaching in biblical scripture and
that's
stuff like
not
that.
true. They never taught the Earth was flat.
They actually did, man.
No, that's a lie.
And then they put Galileo on house arrest
You
for
want to admit you're
suggesting that
lying? You want to
no, it's
admit
not.
you're lying? Are you
It
not
is.
going to admit you're lying? They did not teach the Earth was flat.
They 100% did, my man.
Okay, well I can't. You're going to drive me nuts if you're going to lie about this stuff. They did not. No one taught that. That's crazy. Oh my God, where do they grow these people? I know for a fact. Look, I used to be super into flat Earth debate, so this is embarrassing. But I know for a fact that that's not true. I know for a fact that's not true. So he was just lying. This is what they do. Are we surprised? Yeah, they taught the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church taught the Earth was flat. The Bible teaches the Earth is flat, guys. Yeah, it's so true. Said no one ever. So they put Galileo under house arrest because he wrote in the book that the Pope was an idiot. Gaia Galileo was like a really pretentious, sort of like an atheist type where he thought he was smarter than everyone. And so he called the Pope an idiot. And the Pope, so back then you couldn't call the Pope an idiot, publicly at least. Like you couldn't publish a book calling the Pope an idiot. That would get you in trouble. So he got in trouble for calling the Pope an idiot. He was like well known as like a jerk if you look into it. So the whole thing about like, oh, the church was against science. No, the church commissioned Galileo to do his science. And also you got to keep in mind that the evidence at that time, they had a working model of a geocentric solar system. So it's like they're like, well, if we have this working model of the geocentric solar system, why should we accept a heliocentric model of the solar system? They didn't have the evidence at that time. Well, there is a, I don't know if the geocentric model has problems explaining some things, right? Like so the heliocentric model is better, but like you can make a model to explain crap that's false. So like being able to predict things happening in the future doesn't guarantee any sort of like truth or something or knowledge. That's why we still need to rely on God for knowledge. So this person Roddy Toddy that atheism is the most likely truth. So that's a probability claim. So guess what you need for probability claims, God? To make a probability claim, you need something that's absolute and static to account for the static variable in the probability. Isn't that funny? It's like no matter what they say, they're implicitly, utterly dependent upon the Christian God in all their actions and reasoning. Give me empirical evidence of Christianity being true. Okay, so the empirical evidence of Christianity being true is this. You're typing in the chat. Okay, for you to type words in the chat, there has to be uniformity of nature. And the only way we can epistemically justify the uniformity of nature is if we accept the claims of the Bible to be the Word of God. Wrecked. Do I believe the earth is flat like it says in the Bible? What are you talking about? No one says that. There's no Bible scholar that says the earth is flat. There's goofy preachers that say that, and that's about it. I mean, do you realize that there's goofy preachers that say anything? They'll say anything. So I don't see what like some weird preacher says saying something weird. I don't see what that proves. Like, do you want to be responsible for all the weird stuff every atheist says? You don't think we can find a bunch of atheists saying weird crap? Do you want to be responsible for that? Like, what the hell is this? I can't prove. How do you prove anything without God? That's the question. I think God is the necessary standard for truth. What's the standard of truth that's not God? How do you prove anything without God? It's not yapping. That's a legitimate question. If you want to talk about proof, don't you think you should have a standard of proof? What are you even talking about if there's no standard of proof when you're talking about proving things? What does it mean to prove something without a standard? Science is fully explained without God. How do you have science? No, science can't prove logic. Science can't prove math. Science can't prove language. Science can't prove the uniformity of nature. What else does science need? Science can't prove the past. What scientific experiment proves the past? Welcome, Brian.
What's up, man?
I'm playing a video game. What would you like to say?
Um, well, I guess my my first contention was with your first point in saying that Christianity is objectively proven.
Sure.
Uh, I just kind of want to understand what you mean by that.
I think Christianity is a starting point or foundational belief, and we prove those type of beliefs with the transcendental argument. And so,
Okay.
the transcendental argument for God would prove Christianity is uniquely necessary to prove anything, I guess.
Okay. So as a Christian, I assume that you take the Bible to be the the holy text, the text of truth, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, I take it to be the Word of God.
Okay. Can I ask how you come to that conclusion?
That's what the Bible says. So that I believe in the self-attesting Christ of Scripture.
Okay. So the Bible says that, right? But before you read the Bible, how are you able to know that that's what you're seeing and seeing, you know, and that's what's the truth in front of you?
Before I read the Bible, in order to even like think or observe the world or do anything, like God would have to have revealed himself in creation and human history.
Okay. And assuming that he did so, so assuming that you're brought up as a kid, I'm not sure how old you are. You sound like you're in your 20s or so, same as me.
Yeah.
But how I'm just curious as to how you come to know that whatever Christ says is the truth.
Because unless we accept that God revealed himself and Christ is the truth, then like what would the truth be? You'd have no idea, right?
But how are we aware that Christ has revealed himself?
Because God took the initiative to reveal himself to humans in
Yeah,
human
but I'm
history.
my bad, sorry. But I was asking like how did he reveal himself?
Lots of ways. We have the history, the Abraham, Moses, Jesus, the eyewitness testimony in the scripture. We have um, uh, when we look at the world, you see like all everything in the world would exemplify ultimate intention and ultimate design, and only could do so if it was revealed through Christ. So
Um,
anytime you think or look at the world or do anything, it's like God's revealing Himself.
okay, I can understand that perspective, but like I would think that it's a perspective that has has been ingrained in somebody who grew up in an environment that was
No, I'm making a logical.
Christian
No,
or
I'm making a
theistic.
logical argument. I'm making a logical argument.
Okay,
Son,
can you provide the premise and conclusion of your argument?
if knowledge, then God. We have knowledge, therefore God. Christian God.
Why do you assume that if knowledge then God?
Because God's necessary for knowledge.
Yeah, but that's my question. Why is God necessary for knowledge?
Um, because for there to be logical consistency, we need to explain universals. So God would be like the concrete universal, for example. That's one
I mean,
reason.
I think that we can compute. I think that we can allude to concrete universals without there needing to be some sort of God. No,
What's the concrete universal that's not Jesus?
mathematics. That's like
Okay.
the first like major one, right?
Okay, I know you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Everyone listening knows you don't know what the hell.
You just like exposed that you don't know. Like mathematics is like
Do you want to just?
is in
Are
what
we gonna?
universe is 2 + 2 not equal to 4, buddy?
Do you want to humble yourself and admit you don't know what you're talking about? You want to have a little
Brother, like I'm not interrupting you. Like I'm asking you questions. Like stop getting triggered. All right.
math isn't concrete. Math is abstract. I asked for a concrete universal.
Is 2 + 2 abstract or is that concrete?
Yeah, it is abstract.
2 + 2 is abstract. You retard.
Yeah, it
You're a
is.
retard if you think that.
Oh, you can't say that word, ableist. What a horrible ableist. How am I trolling? That guy just totally crashed out. How am I getting cooked? That guy just he used a word that I had to remove him. He used a bad word.
Okay, my bad. I know TikTok rules. I shouldn't have used that word. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, you use the words you are, so
Can you give me a second chance?
yeah, I'll give you another life.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I do have to say, uh, you know how they do in the debate. Name one good thing about your opponent. I do like your profile picture, so I will lay that out to hopefully create some positive grounding for us.
I've said, wait, hold on. Roddy Toddy in the chat. I don't say horrible shit to women. What are you talking about? Maybe
I hey I haven't heard you say anything about horrible about women either, so I'll
I
put
say
that out
good
there.
things about women. Like maybe as a joke, I might like tease someone.
I
Anyways,
haven't heard it, so I will do
well,
that
I mean,
as
I
well.
make jokes, so maybe he's talking about sometimes I was teasing someone, but I always have I say good things about women. So, anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, no, jokes are okay. Yeah, I don't. I think the majority of the audience doesn't assume that of you.
Yeah, I just want to make that because I'm like a feminist. So,
Hey, fair enough, fair enough.
anyways, go ahead.
But yeah, I kind of just wanted to get into, um, because it does sound like you are, uh, like you have a background in like philosophy,
Not really.
and
I just been studying this argument a lot. I've read papers. I've read philosophers. I have to use like Chat GPT to help me understand crap.
hey, well, fair enough. Like if you're like interested in the arguments and whatnot, like ChatGPT is going to be drawing from like the majority of philosophers. So I'm not too angry against that kind of evidence from you. But I guess my contention is that I kind of want to go over like the second one where you say that like atheism is
All right.
irrational. That's kind of where I kind of feel as if, because my argument is that atheism and theism are equally as irrational and have equally as little uh, foundational proof as each other, and I guess that's kind of where I want to start.
Yeah. Well, I would reject that. Right? I think like um, when we're talking about starting point and foundational beliefs, we have to use like a coherency theory of truth, and that I don't. I think only Christian theism is like coherent within the system. That atheism would entail like serious contradictions that would make it like impossible.
Okay, and like okay, so if I were to grant that to you, like I think that you would have to grant to me that like in that same way that atheism would be incomprehensible, that the belief in a all ruling God and a one ruling religion through proven through like the text of a sacramental book written thousands of years ago. Like I think that would be like equally as irrational, no?
No, because
Why not?
because like due to human limitations, we need to accept that like God reveals knowledge to us. If God doesn't reveal knowledge to us, then we're like lost in the dark. We can't make sense of anything.
Okay, but okay, so yeah, so this is what I'm so I guess okay, so I'm asking kind of like a personal question here. So I guess for you, how did God reveal Himself to you? Like you
Well,
don't have to
God,
get like super
God
specific. I know like people are like super private with their religion, but like just in general, I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, God doesn't do anything like specific to me. He reveals himself to everyone. Like it's obvious to, because like to even talk, God is necessary to talk. There has to be the order in the world, the order in logic, the order in math, the I don't know, like the fact like justice, morals, beauty, like these things are explained by God.
Okay, I guess okay, so I guess this is where I'm lost. How are they explained by God?
Because he's like an ultimate standard of like what's good. So we have like an absolute moral claims
So
alone.
is God to you like a is God like whenever you reference God, are you referencing like the ultimate perfection, or are you referencing some being or entity that created our universe? Is what I'm asking.
There's a create. I mean, it's Jesus. Don't you know who Jesus? I mean, like, what do you mean?
Yeah, but like in Christianity, there's like that triplet, right, of the Holy Spirit, Jesus, and God. No, um, but anyways, that wasn't even my question. My question was how how are you certain that I kind of want to get back to what I was asking in the beginning, about the self evident God and how He makes it obvious to everybody. Because as an atheist, like I'm just saying, like I think this is just like obvious. Like as an atheist, to me, it's not self evident that God is there. So that's, I think, proof that what you're saying is not true. So I just need more evidence in your affirmation of the existence of God.
But the problem is, like, I could throw a million evidences at you, but the problem is how you evaluate evidence. It's your starting point, your foundational belief.
Well, okay. Well, what's wrong with my
Because
foundational?
I think God is like that which makes facts true. So God's the
Okay,
standard of truth. I
but
don't
why do okay? How did you get to that conclusion though? That God is what makes reality and truth.
he reveals it.
But like I'm asking, how does he reveal it though? Like this is like the circularity in the argument. How does he reveal himself to you? Is it the Bible? Is it church? Is it prayer? Any of those?
Told you, dude. He reveals God's mind orders the world. So when we see the order in the world, when we look at the patterns in the world, that's the mind of God. Like when an artist makes a painting and you look at the painting, it reveals something about the artist. He's expressing himself in his art. Like creation is
I
God's.
think that's, but I think that we can agree that that is pretty different from
Okay.
like a
Well, good
religion.
luck in hell, sir. Oh, sorry, Darth's coming up. I would have let you talk to him.
Why did you remove him?
Because I had removed him that was a second chance, and he was just being goofy again. So I was trying to like dumb it down with the painting example. He asked me that
Well,
question.
they sit there and go, well, how does God reveal it? Well, okay, so the world will be emblematic of either dependence or independence upon God, right?
I told him all this stuff. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like, and then so I was trying to dumb it down with like the artist example to dumb it down for him, and he's still like, duh, 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 I don't get it, duh.
Is this the Darth Dawkins from Discord? Fucking Discord debate
No.
legend?
No.
Oh, my bad. Never mind.
You got me excited for a second. Jesus.
I was just been told I sound like him, so I decided to imitate his avatar.
Okay, fair enough. I appreciate the sarcasm, but like, I am genuinely curious if you are the Darth, because I have to put this out forth. I am a Destiny simp, and I'm familiar with your argumentation with Destiny, so I'm just curious.
Look, why then you must be a moron.
Why? Why do you say that?
How old are you?
I'm 24.
Okay. Without
How old are you?
trying to
Wait, can I ask how old are you first?
Yeah, I'm 63.
Oh my. Okay, all right. Sorry.
Now, without trying to be mean-spirited, I'm going to be a straight shooter. You
Yeah.
sound and conduct yourself like a 16-year-old.
You sound and conduct yourself like an 83-year-old, buddy.
You see how you did the way that you just responded to me,
And the way that you
demonstrates
initially
okay,
went into like, all right, sorry, you're gonna cut me off.
Okay. So when I was 24 years old, I was getting married and very shortly going to be having my first child. This 24-year-old, he just thinks I'm being insulted. I'm not. I'm being straightforward honest. He literally conducts himself and sounds. You see, they're so accustomed to this little giggling. A 24-year-old man giggling like a schoolgirl. Right? No, Brian, you're not coming up. You literally proved my point. Your very response to a legitimate critique of the way you come across. You don't come across as a 25-year-old man. You come across like a teenage, giggly little effeminate boy.
Yeah, I talked to him.
Brian, if you send another invite request, your account will be blocked. So don't send another invite request or you're going to be blocked. And what does he do? He sends another invite request.
He's ridiculous. I kicked him. I gave him, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me the evidence of God so I can just laugh. Laugh in your face.
See, here's what they don't understand. When we present our position that the world reveals God, the world is emblematic of God, the world indicates ultimate design and intentionality, they're so effing stupid and incompetent. They think that the non-acceptance of what we say simply suffices. It doesn't. To not accept what we are saying is to make either an explicit or more commonly an implicit counterclaim. So then the question follows from that. If they don't accept how we're saying God is revealed to the world, and they instantly make a counterclaim, usually implicit, then have they justified that the world exemplifies independence from God? Do they have a cogent rationale for that? No, they don't. They simply just take it as a default position, unjustified, unargued for. Right? This is why I said, and you agree, every Christian apologist needs to read the paper Atheological Apologetics.
Yeah.
because he was doing exactly what the paper says. They're smuggling in their position, conceiving it as and almost verbalizing as though it's a default position. And if somebody presents a rationale to the contrary, if it doesn't satisfy them for whatever reason, then their non acceptance of it settles the issue. It doesn't settle the issue. It's an unargued. Let me just say one more thing. The non acceptance of our rationale that the world reveals God as we unpack it, the non acceptance of it is an unargued for counterclaim. And they're actually stupid and arrogant enough to think that they're not responsible for giving a defense. Even the professional atheists are this stupid. They don't understand the elementary mistakes that they're making metaphysically. They actually think by saying, well, that doesn't prove it, that is a rebuttal. It's not a rebuttal.
What was I gonna say? No,
I'm sorry I was so long-winded. I just had to get that out.
You really are. What were we talking about again?
No, how they think that the rejection of our rationale for God, that it suffices just for them to say, well, that doesn't prove it. Well, you're asserting that doesn't prove it, does not prove that we didn't prove it.
Right. So yeah, this is what they'll do is like I'll make an argument and they'll just be like, that's not an argument. It's like
Yeah. Right. Well, that's not a rebuttal.
Yeah.
They not accepting what we say is just simply a counterclaim. Okay, what do you have to back up your counterclaim? What if we were to say in the face of them saying there's no evidence for God? Well, that statement doesn't prove what you're saying.
Yeah.
Isn't it a kind of, even though we know better as Christians, isn't a little bit shocking that so many thousands upon thousands of these people all think in the same stupid way? And I'm not just simply saying they all think in the same way stupidly because their conclusion that God doesn't exist. I'm just saying they use the same stupid, non sequitur rationales that are just not substantive.
They always
When I asked Massimo Pallucci, remember Massimo Pallucci debated William Lane Craig. Craig just doesn't grant anybody to debate him. He's very picky. I spoke to Massimo Pallucci and I said, and remember, at the time he had at least 2 PhDs, if not 3 PhDs. I know now he has 3 PhDs. I said, how is it that God doesn't exist? And he says, well, I just don't have a reason to believe in God. I said, it doesn't follow from what you just said that God doesn't exist. And you know what he did? He just repeats the same thing all over again.
Yeah, they just like that guy, that Brian guy. He just I would like explain myself, give arguments, and they just keep repeating themselves over and over.
Roddy, you're just making stoodle adolescent quips. If you'd like to come up and present your rebuttal to me, I'll be glad to talk with you. So come on up. But my guess is you don't have any balls.
Man, this guy I was listening. I was what? Oh, this
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, Roddy, hold on a second. Roddy, come on up. If you don't come up, then your counterclaims in the text is you're just a drive-by heckler. That's all. You don't have any balls. Yeah, if you don't come up and back up what you're saying in the text, you will be muted. Okay? And I won't repeat myself. So make another post without coming up and you're muted. Goodbye. You see, this is the amazing thing. They just laugh it off. Okay?
This
They had look, even when they're shown not to have not any balls, and they're shown to be completely inept in supporting their counterclaims, and we point out and we expose them that they have no balls, they just laugh it off like schoolgirls.
this
Um,
guy.
uh, User 761, come up and defend your statement. You're invoking empiricism, which is a fallacy. Okay, so come on up. If you don't come up, you're going to be muted, user 761. Okay, you're a complete idiot. Okay, you're muted until you come up. Does he not know that scientific theories are models that cannot be known in an absolute way because they're not omniscient? So they have to exercise a certain amount of conjecture and extrapolation and faith. First of all, Zoom, you people need to get your head out of the sand. I'll put it this way: a Catholic priest did not discover the Big Bang. George Lamontre was a Catholic priest who was the first person to publicly express that the universe began with some type of an explosion. Okay, he did not formulate the idea of the singularity followed by a Big Bang. Okay, and also the Big Bang is not a discovery; it's not a fact. It's just simply a current prevailing materialistic model. Sometimes I just shake my head that I just should stop wasting my time trying to educate these ignorant slobs. These people are so ignorant, it isn't funny. No, my parents were not believers.
This guy goes up onto. I was on an app, like an abortion live debate, and a guy came up trying to argue about God existence, and he goes like, uh, "Is logic necessary?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." The host of the thing, right? And then he goes, "Oh, is logic contingent upon God?" The guy's like, "Yeah." He's like trying to show. You see how sleazy that is, Darth?
I'm not understanding your point.
So he asked, you know how there's like in philosophy, there's necessary and contingent. They're like
Yeah, yeah.
mutually
Uh-huh.
exclusive. But then there's contingent in the sense of dependence, which is like a colloquial use of it.
I'm
Right.
sorry. This is my fault, not yours. I'm very tired, and I just lost track for a minute or two. So if you could go back 2 or 3 sentences, I'd
This
appreciate
he
it.
did. It was one of these like sophist Phil Bro atheists where he does this like is
Right. Hmm.
logic is necessary, right? The guy's like, yeah, but he goes, but logic is contingent upon God. The guy's like, yeah, and he's like, oh, contradiction.
Well, there's different modes of necessity.
That's
Yeah, he's just being an asshole.
yeah.
Right?
Well, but there's
It's it's
contingent.
it's it's a
I,
it, yeah,
the
yeah.
way
There
I
are
thought of it
contingent,
is
yeah,
like there's contingent in the sense of a dependence relationship, but also there's
yeah,
contingent in the sense of could be otherwise. So he's
yeah. So oxygen is necessary for me staying alive, but the existence of oxygen in and of itself is not absolute because the God is the one who sustains the molecular identity over time. So look, he's just the guy's being an asshat.
It's a equivocation fallacy, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're just trying to bamboozle people who aren't familiar with like philosophical terms.
Joe Preet, I don't want to have to mute you, but again, you're speaking out of complete ignorance. Please come up and defend your statement. The Big Bang is not a fact. The Big Bang is just simply a pervasive popular model. So come up, Jog. Okay, Jog Preet, come up and defend your statement. If you don't, you're getting muted. He says the Big Bang's observable. They're so stupid. They think because we make observations, and then from these observations we conclude that the universe is expanding in all different directions, and from that, that's an observation of the Big Bang. I mean, they're just so stupid.
Because of the successes of science, they just take everything they say as the
Yeah,
gospel.
and by the way, just within the last couple of years, there's been a new scientific paper calling into question the legitimacy of the conclusion about the nature of the redshift. That the
Hello?
redshift could be, yeah, welcome. Are you an atheist?
Yes, I'm an atheist.
Okay, I'm just going to tell you the rules. If you evade simple and reasonable questions, you will be kicked. Okay? If
Mhm.
you become verbally disruptive when I make a point of moderation, you will be kicked. Okay? When we deal with atheists on this platform, more often than not, they're evasive, deceptive, and unruly. So we have strict rules here. Okay? You're free
Mhm.
to vigorously disagree and tell us we're wrong, and we can have a long, drawn out, debate. Disagreeing and parting company and agree to do it again. But we don't tolerate deception, evasion, or bad behavior. Okay?
I was a Christian for many, many years from when I was young, and then something happened in my church, and I just drifted away, and now I'm an atheist.
Okay. Can,
This
can
happened
you can you
a
tell
couple
me
years
why
ago.
God? Can you tell me why God doesn't exist?
God doesn't exist because there's no proof. If I ask you to prove God exists, you say it's
Okay.
about faith.
Okay. When you say there's no proof or evidence for God, can you please explain that?
Well, scientifically, God can't exist. Like Adam and Eve, for example. How did they exist if we
No,
have
I,
fossils
I'm
and
not. I'm
evidence that
not.
we
I'm
came
not.
from?
I'm not. I'm not hearing a clear example. You said there's no evidence for God. Please explain how the world exemplifies independence from God.
Well, we have us coming from single-celled
No,
organisms.
no. That is a materialistic, retrodictive conjecture.
Uh-huh.
You're talking about abiogenesis, right? From
Hmm.
abiogenesis to evolution. Abiogenesis, they don't know. They have no idea how abiogenesis could have occurred. There are numerous multiple conjectures about it. So abiogenesis is not a fact. Even evolution is not a fact. Okay?
Hmm.
So even if evolution were true, which I would dispute, but even if I were to grant that, how would it follow from that that God doesn't exist?
Well, in the Bible it says about Adam and Eve,
Okay, well
but
now what you're doing is you we're talking about atheism. Atheism is that there are no gods. What you're doing is you're doing bait and switch, as most atheists do. You're going from defending that there are no gods or God. Now you're attacking a specific type of God. If you told me that there's no ice cream in the bowl, right? And I said, tell me why there's no ice cream in the bowl. And you say, well, there's no ice cream in the bowl because um, strawberry ice cream is no longer in production. Now, do you see the fallacy in that?
yes, but
So, criticizing Christianity, which is one among several theistic models of reality, attempting to criticize Christianity doesn't get you to the truth of atheism unless your rationale shows that no God can exist, therefore the Christian God exists. So you're
okay.
not you're not explaining to me how the world is not evidence for God. If I told you the world is evidence for God, you wouldn't accept that, would you?
No, because that
Okay,
doesn't make any
and would
sense.
you and would you insist that I unpack and defend that claim?
Yes.
Good. Well, you're making the same claim, but in the negative, that there's no evidence for God. Would you please explain to me how you determined that the entire world is not indicative or it stands in independence from God? Because that's your position, right?
Yes. Okay.
Good. Can you explain to me how you determine the world is independent of God?
So if God does that did exist and he's like all
No, no,
powerful and
no,
all
no, no,
good.
no, no, no. Stop. Don't give me this if
No?
stuff.
Okay.
What you need to do is if you are going to negate a proposition, any proposition, let's say the proposition is represented by the letter A. In order to falsify or negate A, you have to present not A. Okay?
Okay.
So, what is your identity statement that will function as the negation for the identity statement, which we call God?
Why is there so much pain and evil in the world?
Asking me a question is not an identity statement falsifying God as an identity statement. So I'm waiting for you to explain to me how the world that you have determined that the world is to be reckoned as independent from God. How'd you figure that out? See,
If
what I'm doing is I'm showing you the utter bankruptcy of your position. Because every time I repeat the same question over and over again, you just rabbit trail. Do you know what rabbit trailing is?
hmm
You're going onto a semi-related topic. You're not explaining to me how you figured out that any state of affairs exists with complete metaphysical independence from God. How'd you figure that out?
if evil exists, then God cannot be all powerful.
Okay. On what basis do you say that an all-powerful God couldn't temporarily, according to a plan, allow evil and then to adjudicate evil?
Well, if he created all of humanity and then he puts pain on them for something they didn't do, why would a all-powerful, amazing God do that?
Do you have children?
Yes, I have one child.
Okay. Did you know before you brought another life into the world that they would experience pain?
Yes, of course,
Good.
everybody
Yeah.
experiences
Good.
pain.
Good. Good. Then you're evil for bringing that child into the world, knowing that it would experience pain.
So you expected me not to have children at all?
Listen to me. Did you have the power to prevent the child coming into existence, knowing that it would experience some kind of pain and even possibly great pain? Could you have prevented that?
No, but I don't have the ability
Oh,
to stop pain.
you couldn't have prevented bringing a child into the world.
Well, God could have prevented pain, but he
You're
didn't.
not. You know what you're doing. You're doing what every atheist does. That when somebody like myself prevents defeaters for your position, you're ignoring the defeater. You're not giving a rebuttal to the defeater, and then you're just going down another rabbit trail.
God gave us the ability to have kids who would
Do you,
experience
okay?
pain.
Hey, listen, sweetheart. You're done because you are a
Oh.
deceitful and a devious person. Because every time I make a point to you in rebuttal to you, because I'm taking what you're saying seriously, you ignore what I'm saying and you go down a rabbit trail every time. That's the sign of somebody who's deceitful. Goodbye.
Oh, okay. Jeez Louise.
You see how devious and deceitful these people are?
Every
You know,
time.
imagine somebody comes and says, "Hey, P Mars, it's Friday night and I don't want to go to a movie. How about we play you, me, and somebody else? We'll play Monopoly, right?"
Hello.
Now, what if you find out that they're cheating? Are you going to continue to play with them? No.
Or worse, what
And
if it's poker?
yeah,
And
you know,
there's real
the atheists should be ashamed of themselves, although they're not. They're utterly shameless. They are constantly being devious, deceitful, evasive, rabbit trailing, and filibustering, and they have no shame about it. And then when
Oh,
you confront
guys.
them about it when they're doing it, I'll be with you in a moment, sir. When you
Okay.
confront the atheists with their little devious behavior that is pervasive among all of the internet atheists, okay, with rare exceptions, when you confront them about it, they're either in complete denial or they're just shameless about it, and it's disgusting. Why is it that people that claim that they are in hot pursuit of truth and reason, and they're the rational ones, who are constantly being evasive, deceptive, and obfuscating and prevaricating? Gee, isn't that amazing? Go ahead, Canadian. What would you like to say?
Do you guys think that the Bible is inherent?
Do I believe in errancy? Yes, I do.
Okay, do you believe that the Bible is univocal?
Do I believe that the Bible is univocal? You're going to have to explain to me how you're using that term.
As in, you can only get one meaning if you read the Bible.
You mean is there one basic message?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
there's one
Jesus is
basic
God,
message.
something like that.
Yeah, there's one basic message that there's a creator who made the world. He decided to create agents for whom he could fellowship with both angels and men. And some angels rebel and mankind rebel. And God implemented a plan of redemption by which he incarnated himself 2,000 years ago and rose again from the dead. And he's in the process of completing his plan of redemption, which he will then finally adjudicate all evil.
Okay. Do you guys believe that only Christians that believe that Jesus is God are saved, and all the
Uh,
rest of the denominations are
if,
done?
if if somebody does not believe that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, then I have good reasons as a Bible believing Christian to conclude that they don't have the Holy Spirit in their lives and they've never been truly born again.
Okay. Thanks for answering the questions like straight up. By the way, I'm just going at it.
I always do. I'm not like the atheists do who play little dodgeball all the time.
Okay, so going back to the inerrancy, do you believe that the Bible could be wrong? So, say we have an event that happened in the Bible, but we don't have much proof. Do you still believe that it happened?
Okay, so let me clarify your question. Are you asking me that could events in the past that the Bible affirms are historical events be not true?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'm not really understanding. So you believe that everything?
Everything that the Bible affirms to be true, including past events.
Okay.
Do I think that any of those affirmations that those events are real could be false or wrong? No, I don't believe they could be wrong.
Okay, so you believe in the what's his name? Moses in the desert with 625,000 soldiers. You believe in the flood, the ark.
I don't know what the precise number was. Do I believe the historical accounts of Moses leaving Egypt? Yes, I do.
Yeah, it's plausible, yeah, but
No, I didn't say it's plausible. You asked me, do I believe it's historically true? The answer is yes.
oh, I didn't ask if it was. I like we could probably come to a conclusion that Moses did exist, but
Sir,
the Exodus.
am I not making myself clear? All the historical events recorded in the Bible
Hmm.
that are affirmed in plain language as being actual history, I accept as true, and I therefore believe that because they're true, they cannot be false.
Do you believe that Jesus could raise people from the dead?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So when I'm talking about Matthew 27, you believe that actually happened?
You're going to have to clarify what you're referring to in Matthew 27.
So he came after, I think it was after he was resurrected, and he raised people out of their tombs, and they started wandering around Jerusalem.
Yeah, there were a number of people who had recently died
Hmm.
who were temporarily resurrected.
Okay. How long do you think that the flood happened for? About a year, right?
Yes.
Okay. So while the whole world was submerged, while Noah was in the ark,
No. What? Yeah,
no.
I
Okay.
don't think you understand the nature of the flood. Is it your impression that the water table rose and rose and rose eventually to that the level of the water around the earth was at the same level 360 degrees?
Oh, I believe that God flooded the earth.
Okay. What do you think was one of the main mechanisms of flooding the continents?
God telling Noah, go over there, I'm going to submerge the whole world.
No. What do you think
I'd rather
caused the
just listen
flooding
to
of the
scripture.
continents?
Pardon?
The Bible teaches that God made the fountains of the deep erupt. What this is referring to in biblical language is massive beyond anything we can comprehend. Excuse me, I have hiccups.
Mm-hmm.
Is geological upheaval. When we have massive geological upheaval, you're going to have earthquakes of unimaginable proportions that would dwarf even the greatest magnitude earthquakes that we have in the world today. Numerous recurrent earthquakes, right, would cause numerous recurrent tsunamis spilling over the edges of all the continents. When the water spills over the edge of the continent, it seeks its own level, right? And then will drain, and then recurrent tsunamis again. Then you have recurrent flooding. So the continents were flooded not just once, but over and over again recurrently.
We'd be able to measure this, you know that, right? But there's not like a lick of evidence on any sort of wall.
Okay, well,
And there's
you're completely ignorant and uninformed. How old are you?
I'm 20.
Okay, the fossil record can be defended, whether you or anyone else except I can be defended as the graveyard of the flood. Do you know what the geological column is?
No, let me go search it up when we're done
Oh,
speaking.
okay. So
I'd like
you
to
have
know.
no idea. Yeah, you say there's no look of evidence, and yet you're speaking out of complete ignorance. Are you familiar with the Grand Canyon?
Yeah, I'm mostly going off of Bill Nye. He spoke to a biblical scholar,
Bill
and
Nye. Bill Nye
the
is a
biblical scholar couldn't even go up against us.
Bill Nye is an absolute ignoramus fool. Here's a man 20 or 25 years ago said that you are absolutely male or female based upon your genetics. But then the wokeness came into our culture in the last few years. He completely flipped on what he said scientifically 20 years ago.
I don't know what that has to do with his scholarship.
No. It was scholarship.
Scholarship?
Bill Nye is not a scientist.
Okay.
He only has, I believe, a bachelor's degree
Yeah, true.
in
Well, it's a
engineering.
BS. It's
In
science.
Yeah, no, you're not understanding. Okay,
Yeah.
as far as I know, I could be mistaken. He doesn't have a master. It's in no, it's not mechanical engineering. It's some type of engineering. Bill Nye is not a science. He calls himself Bill Nye the science guy. He's not a scientist.
Okay.
He's just a popular TV guy that promotes science for children.
Okay, well, he had a debate, and then he was showing his sources and stuff,
Yeah.
showing
So
that we'd be able to.
all right,
Okay,
listen
you could cut me
to
off
me,
again. It's
young
fine.
man. I'm 3 times your age, literally. You don't know what you're talking about. Do you have any idea what the geological column is?
No. What do you want me to
Okay,
search up? I
so
could
you
research
see
it.
the fact that you don't, when you say there's not a lick of evidence, and you don't even know what the geological column is and what its implications are and how it got there. Do you know that? Are you familiar with the Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
Okay. The Grand Canyon is a cutaway section with numerous sequential sedimentary layers.
I'm gonna go look at it right now while you.
Yeah. Where did all the sedimentary layers come from?
You could just keep going. Like I said, I don't know about like this evidence.
Okay. So
You
when
can
you
keep
say
going.
there's not a lick of evidence, you're speaking out of complete ignorance. What you really mean is, in your schooling, they didn't teach you that there's any geological or topographical features of the world that are indicative of a flood. And the
Yeah,
reason
what's it
why
called
they
again?
didn't, I didn't hear you.
The what column? What's it called again?
The geological column. Now, the geological column is an artificial construct. It doesn't exist in any one place. Because there are sedimentary materials of similar composition in different places around the world, they do a thought experiment where they put them together and they have this artificial concept of a geological column, which is supposed to allegedly and conjecturally represent different eons of time.
Okay, so may I
Right?
ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so whenever you're referring to a certain theory or a certain like something happening, right? You'd have to connect it to um your claim. So this would be not an
what?
evidence of
I'm
something, so
tired.
it would
I'm
attach
tired
yourself.
right now, but it's disappointing. Okay, you do not sound like a stupid 20-year-old. I'm not suggesting they are, but you are grossly uneducated on these issues. Okay, through no fault of your own. Can you tell me who the father of modern geology was?
Again, you're just asking for like
Yeah,
things
you
that I
don't
don't know.
know. Charles Lyell.
Okay, I'm gonna tell
What
you. Can
role?
you?
What
Okay, you're
role?
getting
Okay,
mad.
have it. Look,
Uh-oh.
okay, I'm not going to argue with any further. You are completely ignorant of what you're talking about. I'm not saying that to insult
I'm
you.
asking for your proof.
I'm trying proof for what?
Okay, so whenever I'm gonna tell you again, so it's like level 1 scholarship. So whenever you have something like this, right? Like you just brought up the geological column, right? You'd have to attach it to a certain scholar or something that's using this to
Okay,
prove that the flood happened.
dude, listen to
So
me.
can you refer
Okay,
to me
listen to
someone so I
me.
could?
Do you
I'm not saying
think?
you're wrong, but
Okay,
go for
sir, the geological column
it. Mm-hmm.
doesn't exist in any one place in the world. It is a composite thought experiment combining the different sedimentary layers around the world that have striking similarities. They are all combined in one thought experiment, and it is alleged because of unscientific starting points called uniformitarianism that the geological column represents eons of time. But the point is, this is just simply an ideological imposition. Okay? Do you know who came up with the foundational idea that the way to understand sedimentary depositions uh, they will be interpreted as deep time? It was Charles Lyell in the middle of the 19th century, the father of modern geology. He came up with an ideological filter called uniformitarianism, which is with us still today. That the key to the past is the present. That when we look at sedimentary deposits, we will not interpret it as being the product of a massive catastrophe and being laid down very quickly by large amounts of water deposits, but that this happens slowly over long periods of time. He never showed that that was true. He just offered it as a scientific explanation, in opposition to the previously held position of what is called catastrophism.
I got a
Right?
complete different answer yesterday. I think John Steele told me that the Earth was submerged for 180 days, and there's actually proof that it was flood. I keep getting different answers from a bunch of different Christians. I don't know, but okay, you're not really
Yeah.
answering my question though. You're just like
Okay. All right,
explaining it.
dude.
But
I'm
we
done
can move
talking.
past it because you're not gonna like.
Goodbye. You're done.
Okay, well, God.
Isn't this amazing how arrogant this 20-year-old is? He didn't even know the concept of the term of the geological column. And yet he still continues thinking he's going to educate me, and somebody who I'm 3 times his age.
Yeah, a lot of these people that request stuff, they just want to give us like a lecture.
See, the thing is, they can't. They're like Muslims. They cannot bring themselves to believe that the prevailing. You got to mute your. There's something wrong with your mic, Fenton. You're going to get kicked if you don't fix your mic.
Sorry, is it good now?
Yeah. Okay. So just hold on a second. So our previous guest is just an uneducated, ignorant 20-year-old. All right. And I don't say he's ignorant because he disagrees. He's clearly ignorant. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He is the people like him are like Muslims. They cannot bring themselves to believe that the high priests of science, who tell them that the earth and the universe is old, that this pervasive idea held in consensus couldn't possibly be wrong. All right, because we put a man on the moon. You know, this is the result of very poor education in the philosophy of science, right? And therefore, they think anything that comes under the banner of science and declared by scientists is true. Okay, science has a long history of corpses of beliefs that were previously held pervasively and in consensus that were later abandoned. So the fact that a concept or a model of science is held pervasively, and as I said, in consensus, is not a guarantee that the model is true, right? But they can't bring themselves to believe that all these scientists this day, could be wrong on these issues. I mean, they're just so gullible, when it comes to evolution and the Big Bang. Anyway, go ahead, Fenton.
Yeah, okay. A couple things, I guess, are just about that. So the thing with science is that, like, yeah, sometimes like things
How old are you? How old are you?
28.
Okay. Don't think you're going to be educating me on science. I'm 63.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just, obviously you would probably know then that,
I'm not trying to be rude, but I don't want you to waste your time or my time thinking that you're going to give me a mini community college lecture about the nature of science. Is there some point that you'd like to give to us, or a position that you would like to lay down?
I was just going to continue on that one, but
No, I don't want you to continue. I don't need a lecture on science.
No, that's fine. We can skip that. So the reason why I joined is because I don't believe in Christianity based on space, for instance, right? So
Whoa,
the Bible.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't understand what you just said. Go back 2 sentences and say it slower.
Yeah, that's because I wasn't done and you cut me off.
No, you're not speaking. You're not articulating yourself clearly.
Okay. Let me start again then. So in the Bible, how old does the Bible, the people who wrote it, whoever, I don't really care, how old do they believe the Earth is?
Okay. Before I answer the question,
you're good.
You should be informed to know that when it comes to TikTok, I am among the better people who can defend young Earth creationism. Okay? So you're not dealing with a noob here or some country bumpkin. Okay? So
yeah, I get you.
If you hold to a biblical model based upon the biblical genealogies, you're talking about a young Earth in terms of thousands of years, anywhere around 6,000 or 7,000 at the outermost 10,000 years from a biblical perspective.
Yep. Okay, cool. Let's go with the wide one. Let's say worst case scenario, it's 10,000. That's the oldest.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, right? So then,
can you please listen to me? If you don't get to your point soon, I'm going to remove you.
Yeah, I'm trying to. So
No, I don't want you. I don't want you. Listen to me.
Yeah.
You're too old of a young man to sit there and be babbling to me like a 16-year-old. Get to the point.
Okay, so first, stop cutting me off. Second, why is there light coming from millions of years away?
Goodbye.
Okay.
So here we have, what did he say he was, 27, 28? Right? And he's babbling like a 60-year-old, educating a 63-year-old man like he's talking to a 5th grader. Okay? I always love it when they're trying to educate me on science. I always love that. If he hadn't been so arrogant, I would have left him up on stage. But he just wouldn't stop babbling without being substantive and getting to the point. And I warned him multiple times. Look, I'll give you one more chance, but you're going to have to stop babbling and rambling and thinking that you're educating me on something like I'm a 5th grader. Remember, I'm double your age. So get to the point, or else I'm going to drop you without further warning.
Okay, why do we have light coming to us from millions of years away? Millions of light years it's traveled.
Okay. Have you ever heard the expression getting the rug pulled out from underneath you?
Oh, I'm keen to hear this. Continue.
Have you ever, look, dude, I'm not messing around, okay? Have you ever heard that expression?
Yep.
Okay, that's about to happen to you, okay?
Okay.
Now, how fast does light travel in a one-way direction?
It's something like 300,000 kilometers a second.
Really? And who measured light in a one-way direction?
Who measured light in a one-way direction?
Yeah,
I'll have to get up some G.
Okay, so listen carefully. Is light measured round trip, or is light measured in a one-way direction?
It can be measured in a one-way direction.
No, you are completely ignorant. Okay, light cannot be measured in a one-way direction. It's
Okay.
impossible. Did you know that?
Yeah. Okay. That's even fine.
Okay,
So
yeah. So were you ignorant that that light can be measured in a one-way direction? Were you wrong about
yeah,
that?
yeah. I'll eat that. I'll eat
Oh,
that
okay,
for
good.
sure.
So let me ask you this question:
Mhm.
is the speed of a photon restricted by itself, or its environment in terms of maybe what results in the rate of causation?
Probably the rate of causation, but
Okay, okay. So
Mhm.
is there a difference in the rate of causation in one location in the universe versus another?
Yeah, but
Okay, okay.
space.
So here's
Mhm.
the problem.
Mhm.
Okay, is the if the rate of causation, right?
Mhm.
Have you ever heard of relativity and special relativity?
Yeah.
Okay, suppose somebody was traveling at the speed of light in a spaceship, theoretically speaking, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Right? They could travel a certain distance and then turn around and come back. They would have only have aged a very short period of time from their perspective.
Yep.
But when they came back to Earth, it would be millions of years later.
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
You're on point.
so does the rate of causation for objects change depending on your locale in the universe?
Yeah, it does. Yep. I'll say
Okay,
that.
okay. So then claiming that it takes millions of years for the light to get to us is not necessarily true. Have you ever heard of the asynchronous model of the speed of light?
No. I'll look that
Okay,
up
what
while
it
you
means
explain it.
what it means is that the speed of light could be instantaneous going out, but upon round trip it could be 600,000 kilometers per second.
Okay.
So when you say that it takes light millions of years to get here, that's not
Mhm.
something that can be tested.
So if you look in a straight line and the light's coming
Sir,
to you,
are
and you
you
look somewhere else in a straight line.
Are you listening to me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Can you test the speed of light in a one-way direction? The answer is no. Can
Mhm.
light theoretically be instantaneous or near instantaneous in a one-way direction, but 600,000 kilometers round trip?
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Okay. So right there. So if it's the case, or for that matter, if you go to Verisitanium, which is a YouTube channel on science, he says
Mhm.
that the speed of light is not governed by itself, but by the rate of causation in its environment. So
Mhm.
right then and there, if that's true, or the asynchronous model of the speed of light is true, then that totally destroys your notion that it takes millions of years for light to get to us from distant stars.
Well, kind of, but also not quite. So,
Do
let's
you
say
have a
something's going on. Hang
hold on
on.
a second. Hold on.
Can I have my
Okay.
point?
Goodbye.
Oh,
Goodbye.
I let you
You're good.
speak. Let me
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You let me speak. Right. Right. Notice how everything
He's
I say to him. Notice everything I say to them, they just ignore, and then they just babble on.
he was ignoring you and waiting for a turn to speak. That's all he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And he did so repeatedly. That's why I had enough of him. Okay. This is how naive these people are. Well, the scientists say it takes light millions of years to get to us. Oh well, then it must be true because a scientist said it. It's not like scientists haven't been wrong before.
The book I'm reading says the problem with science is they don't. Um, Science isn't inherently bad, but we must, when we do science, give glory to God when we do science. If we don't give glory to God when we do science, then it's going to be used for like
Yeah.
control
You see,
people.
here's the problem. These young skulls full of mush, and those who are even older, they've never exposed themselves to rigorous or robust scientific cases of refutation of this that are in a minority position. They don't even know of the existence of the minority scientific opposition because they've never been told. Okay.
Can science tell us that Schmurder is wrong, or that can science tell us that we should believe the results of the experiment? There's lots of things science is ill-equipped.
Look, if it's the case, right? So, like for example, only until a couple years ago was it agreed upon by many scientists that there was something called the Higgs field, and that the Higgs field provides for the ability for quantum energy to become particles. It could be the case at a subatomic level, or even with the nature of space itself within close proximity to objects of large mass, that there could be something that inhibits or impedes the speed of light. But then when photons are unrestricted by an inhibiting surrounding situation, the speed of light could be unimaginably faster than what we imagine it to be. So the synchronous view of the speed of light, that the speed of light is the same speed in both directions, is not something that is provable. Okay, and these people don't understand this, right? Oh no! Dun dun dun! Ladies and gentlemen, Charlie the Smirker is here.
Darth, I got to pick your brain on something.
As long as you don't pick my nose.
Okay. Do you think that, I think we've talked about this a touch before, but do you think that an infinite regress, appealing to an infinite regress for the birth of the universe, actually it's kind of a paradox, but do you think that can be an escape hatch for atheists?
Everything they say that is inconsistent with what God has revealed about the beginning is an escape hatch and is a figment of their imagination.
Yeah, yeah. I just find that one particularly annoying. That there's
Well,
so many atheists.
I think it's funny that they have a criterion of belief about origin and they say prove it, right?
Yeah,
And yet they will adopt alternate cosmological models other than the creationist model, and they will shove it in our faces without the least bit attempt to give an argument or an establishment that it's true or proving
amen.
it. Okay?
Yeah.
And you see, this just goes to show you their double standard.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Okay? Romans 1 says they are without an excuse, right? They do not want to acknowledge God as their creator when the world clearly exemplifies ultimate design and intentionality. So what they do is they use a figment of their imagination to come up with an alternate explanation because they don't want to accept the obvious. Okay? And then when they come up with an alternate explanation in order to evade what is clear and obvious that the world exemplifies ultimate design and intentionality by the purpose of God, they then claim, because they've adopted a figment of their imagination, that the obvious is no longer obvious. Well, based upon what? And then you know what they'll say? They'll go, "Cause you didn't prove it."
See, like
Yeah. Go ahead.
when we drop like a pencil, we know it's gonna fall to the ground. And it's as if they were to say, like, well, hypothetically, it could fall straight up into the air. But like a hypothetical isn't like defeat what we have evidence for, right?
Okay. Yeah. Charlie, what you need to understand is our current situation is the product of a historical development, not because we have super genius scientists who discovered certain things,
So
such as the
true.
Big Bang. Okay, so what we have is in the latter part of the 18th century, okay, in the 1700s, there was a man by the name of James Hutton, and he made a radical proposal that the geological and topographical features of the Earth, all around the Earth, should not be interpreted as the result of a massive catastrophe of biblical proportions, but rather it's to be interpreted by slow-moving processes over eons of time. And
This is
in
18th
his
century,
position,
Darth.
Hutton was at the end of the 18th century, and I believe slightly over into the 19th.
Okay.
The 19th century was when you had, the Civil War, which was in the 1860s. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So the Civil War was in the 19th century. So you're talking
Right.
about the 1850s, 1860s, 70s, and so on.
Yeah, I know this. I know this.
Okay. All right. Now I'm not trying to talk down to you.
No. I no. Some people don't know. You gotta. I
Okay.
appreciate
All right.
it.
Okay. I didn't know. Okay. So if it sounds like I'm being condescending, I'm not trying
No,
to be that way.
I don't take it that way at all.
I run into a lot of people who don't know this stuff.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So Hutton would have gone into obscurity had not his theory been resurrected and promulgated by the genius of Charles Lyell, who was a lawyer by training, but he had an avocation of geology, and he became the father of modern geology. He wrote a book called Principles of Geology. He wrote 3 volumes. In that book, he presented, without scientific demonstration, that we have to have a new ideological filter, which was called uniformitarianism. That the key to interpreting the past is through slow-moving processes that we see today. So that, for example, the various geological sedimentary deposits are not the result of a massive catastrophes or worldwide flood, but they are the result of depositions over millions, if not billions of years. Okay? Now, the
Darth, you
world...
got J Mike in the chat here.
Okay, he is? Okay, let's get rid of him.
What's the support for P1?
Yeah. Hey, J Mike, when you act like an asshole, you behave like an asshole, and you engage in stalking and harassing, you lose the privilege of interacting with me. But you need to grow up. I like how you're so proud you're a co-host of the Atheist Experience. You know, that and $6.95 will get you a cheeseburger at McDonald's. Let's get rid of him. He's one of the rare people that is one of the biggest asshats I've ever come across on the internet.
I'll tell you what, Darth. You got that video of him and you on YouTube debating, the one where I think Tom Rabbit put it up there.
Yeah,
it was embarrassing. Like you annihilated him. It was pretty clear.
Well, I don't want to brag, but he has mental problems, so we're done with him.
His defensive tag is like, "What if I just don't know anything?"
Dude, that was sad. It was like, are you serious?
Okay, so you have to understand that following the Enlightenment was the abandoning of a biblical worldview and the exaltation of human autonomy and human reason. So by the time we got into the middle of the 19th century, more and more scientific minds decided that they were going to reject the biblical model of the world, and they were going to opt for a scientific one. Now, what you need to understand is what is meant by a scientific approach is what we call a positivist approach. In other words, we will only consider and promote those ideas that are purely materialistic or naturalistic, right? Now, adopting that ideology to interpret the past to the exclusion of, let's say, a book such as the Bible that claims to be divine providential revelation, right, is not something that's scientific for them to reject that. Okay?
Right.
So say they were called the positivists. Okay, there's a guy by the name of, I can't remember his name, is Comte, something like Comte, right? He had a big influence on Darwin and other scientists in his day. They were the forerunners of what we call today philosophical naturalism and methodological naturalism. We will only consider purely naturalistic, mechanistic, and materialistic explanations for things of the distant past that we cannot observe, test, or repeat. Okay, so it's an a priori rejection of a biblical model of reality without a justification that the biblical model is false. It's just simply dismissed because it doesn't come under the moniker of science. So they were called the positivists. Okay, these people, the positivists, had a big influence on the likes of people like Charles Lyell and especially Charles Darwin. Darwin himself became a positivist, right? So this idea was growing and spreading in the sciences because the success of scientific discoveries and advances was going to their head. Okay, that because that we were figuring out more and more stuff, how it happens at unseen levels. Therefore, we have no need of any religious text or revelation from God. All we need is the authority of the human mind, and positivism or purely mechanistic explanations. Okay, so once this idea of uniformitarianism promulgated by Lyell spread like a cancer, then Charles Darwin now had the secret sauce that he needed. That how shall I put this? Without deep time, evolution dies on the vine, right? In order for his theory to work in his understanding of biology, he needed vast amounts of time. But what we know now from a molecular point of view, right, and this can be demonstrated scientifically and mathematically, that even if you have a trillion Earth-like planets, which nobody believes that is the case, even if you were given a trillion Earth-like planets where you had organic material mutating for 14 billion years, that wouldn't even begin to scratch the surface of mutations being able to build the linear coding sequences for a couple of proteins, let alone coding for the entire genome of the animal kingdom. Now, what I just said is so true that world-renowned evolutionary biologist Dr. Eugene Koonin, in his book The Logic of Chance, who is a staunch evolutionist and anti-creationist, said in his own highly technical book Defending Evolution that self-replicating systems, which he's referring to as evolution, in a one-off finite universe is virtually impossible to occur, but with a multiverse and many worlds in one, it's guaranteed.
Right.
Okay? So, you see, once the theory of evolution was snowballing in the scientific community because scientists were abandoning a Christian outlook or a biblical outlook increasingly, right? Not entirely, but increasingly. And it became a very intimidating factor. Once the theory of evolution was dogma throughout the scientific world, right? This idea of deep time followed with the rise of complexity arising out of chaos and non-complexity was extrapolated to the cosmos, to an evolutionary model of the cosmos, that the cosmos evolved over deep time. It wasn't a biological evolution, but it was a cosmological evolution where complexity, given enough time, will episodically occur in a large enough and old enough universe. Right? So you have to understand the relationship between deep time and old universe and an old Earth to the theory of evolution and Charles Lyell being the product of the Enlightenment. The Big Bang is a partial birth child of materialistic deep time and evolutionary thinking. So the Big Bang is just a modern iteration of the positivists. We will only accept purely mechanistic and materialistic explanations of the cosmos and of the solar systems.
Darth, do you know if like while logical or positivism was on its way up, do you know if there was, apologists or philosophers or scientists that were pushing back on it, or did it kind of just percolate through society
Well,
undefeated?
there wasn't as many people in the field working at um, developing counter arguments for it
Right. This
years
was so
ago, like
new.
well, yeah, because evolution, Darwin published the theory of evolution in 1869. It
Hmm.
took many decades before it became pervasive, but it developed pretty quickly in terms of human history. And by that time, you're now into the beginning of the 20th century.
Right.
So by the time of the discovery of DNA occurred in 1952, okay, the theory of evolution was already dogma.
Right.
Okay, and so by this time, because the theory of evolution was dogma, it went to many scientists. And by the way, there's a difference between positivists versus the logical positivists. Okay,
What's
they're not
that?
the positivists were people within um, the either late 18th or into the 19th century that said we will only accept explanations for phenomenon, including the nature of past events in the distant past that are only materialistic or mechanistic in basis, which means it's an a priori denial and rejection that the biblical record is of divine revelation. So what
Right.
they did was they replaced one concept of God explaining the past with another concept where the mind of man is God, and through his pure reason and induction can figure out the distant past where he wasn't, to the exclusion or even the possibility of the divine mind. Okay, so now the mind of man is supreme over everything to explain everything, including the past where nobody was there to observe it.
So what's a logical positivist then?
The logical positivists were philosophical wonks who tended to be atheists in the early part of the 20th century, who said, and the logical positivist was an extension of positivism,
Okay.
where logical positivists said the only things that are meaningful or to consider to be true are those things that we can verify by our senses. Okay,
Oh,
so they're
okay.
very closely related, but they're not precisely the same thing.
Gotcha.
But the positivists were the forerunners of the logical positivists.
So the logical positive may be more abstract and what they.
Yeah, the logical positivist is what you have when you have positivism coming in and totally in an a priori fashion rejecting a biblical model and saying, no, the mind of man is to be reckoned to be supreme and the final authority as explaining past events where nobody was.
Interesting.
Okay. They didn't demonstrate that scientifically, right? How do they demonstrate that the mind of man to the exclusion of possible divine revelation, right? So
Right.
they just exalted the mind of man as the final authority.
Yep.
Why? Because man says so, right? And so now we're in this atheistic realm. Atheism isn't just explicit, it's implicit. So the Big Bang itself is a logical permutation of Darwinism applied to the cosmos. And so much so, it's repeated so much in schools and in documentaries that your average person actually thinks that the Big Bang is a discovery and a fact when it's just simply a mechanistic materialistic model with an a priori denial of a biblical worldview for which they couldn't rationally justify that denial.
Right.
And it's such a genius satanic deception that even certain professing Christians are duped by this, like
Yeah.
William Lane Craig. Right? Craig has built his reputation on using the Big Bang as a defense for God's existence. Well, we just came out with a scholarly paper, not we, but there's been a scholarly paper that just came out that is scientifically calling into question the nature of the interpretation of the so-called redshift of the background radiation in the cosmos, saying that it may not be what they're conjecturing it to be, that it could be an illusion of the way we're interpreting it. You
But
see, this
Darth,
is what happens. Let me just say this. This is what happens when science goes to people's heads, where we exalt human reason above all things. So, for example, David Tong, who gave a lecture on physics in the lecture hall in England where Michael Faraday did his experiments, and he gave a lay presentation about the nature of physics, and he gets done with his brilliant explanation of physics. He says, the current state of the art when it comes to science is physics. We believe that what underlies all particles are different types of fields, okay, that result in particle formation. He then says this to the audience, and when he said it, my jaw dropped open. He said, but we could be entirely wrong if we're looking at it from a wrong perspective.
Wow. Isn't that
Okay?
interesting how delicate it is?
Right. And what's so nice and refreshing is that he's admitting the very truth about scientific models. Just because scientific models may provide us with very accurate predictions is not a guarantee that the models are true and correct.
Well
and in
said.
fact, when it comes to quantum mechanics and Einstein's relativity, they conflict with each other. They
Right.
can't both be true. Okay?
But
you see, yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying I could see when God created everything that there was just a huge explosion when he spoke things into beginning. What are your thoughts on that?
Explosion?
Well, I mean that might be lack of a better term, but
Well, in the Psalms it says God stretched the heavens out. There's a big
yeah,
difference
yeah.
between stretching things out versus an explosion.
I mean, yeah. But I guess there's objects moving apart from one another in a sense. I mean, I don't know how it all
Well,
happened.
that is also a model, which may or may not be true.
Sure.
Let me explain something to you, okay? If I tell you, suppose we're neighbors, right? And you call me up, and let's say we're going to go somewhere, and there was a report that there's a possibility of a snowstorm, and you call me up, and you just woke up, and you go, "Oh, what's the deal? What's the weather outside?" And I look out the window, and I tell you, there's 5 inches of snow on the road. Okay, you're like, "Oh, okay, right." Do you understand that when I am speaking to you, I'm giving you a model? If I tell you the sun rises and the sun sets, that's a model.
Mm-hmm.
It may be an idiom, okay? Everything in science and in life is an expression of our mind is modeling that and then verbally recapitulating the model in our minds that we think is accurate to the external physical world. And people seem to forget this.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we should just doubt models at any time. But the point is, we must never forget that these are all various layers of interconnected and interrelated models. And look, when I talk with people on a regular basis on the interweb, right, they speak of the Big Bang as some holy artifact, right? That it's a discovery. When I was listening to Leonard Susskind, a brilliant physicist, he happens to be an atheist, he referred to the Big Bang properly. He says it's just the current popular model, right? Because he understands probably better than the average person the fundamental nature of scientific investigation. These are all models. Like, for example, just ask somebody, is the periodic table, in terms of its representation of elements, right, is this a model? Right? They're going to think that this is a fact. Now, I personally believe that this model is correct, but it's still a model. Okay? And so what happens is certain models spread pervasively and is held in consensus, and then they're glorified and worshipped as though they're oracles of God.
Right. But not all models are tethered to reality the same way.
No, not all models have equal merit.
Right.
Not all models have equal predictive capability. Do you know that the average person out there has no clue that there are massive problems at different scales of Big Bang cosmology?
Yeah, or evolution.
There are massive problems with the theory of evolution, but your average person has no clue unless they have endeavored themselves to expose themselves to scientific arguments against it.
Right.
Okay? If I talk to the average person out there, I'll say, why do you believe in evolution? And they go, oh, because there's a lot of evidence for it. I go, okay, what's that? They go, oh, well, fossils.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no idea that the actual opposite is true. The fossil record is an embarrassment to Darwinian gradualism, and they have no clue of that truth because they have been told a different story. That the fossils that we've collected presents a very accurate accounting of an evolutionary past when it absolutely does not. Okay? The fossil record, okay, is more consistent as being the graveyard of the flood than it is of Darwinian gradualism. Okay?
Those science textbooks can be so deceptive too, and people that read them probably think that the illustrations of the gradual evolution of a horse.
They think that this is as scientific as doing mathematical calculations of what happens when you combine one chemical with another and what the resulting product is going to be.
It's a story.
They don't understand the difference between the credibility and the scientific nature of certain models versus others.
Right.
Right? They just don't understand. By the way, James, we're not ignoring you. Would you like to say anything?
Oh yeah, no, I'm just waiting for you guys to finish your debate.
Just real quick.
No, go ahead.
Real
quick.
Okay.
Charlie's just a pain in the ass. Okay? So just ignore Charlie.
Just one more thing. It takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I like what Berlinski said. He said sometimes people think that like biology is at the same level of credibility as like physics or mathematics. They're two totally separate sciences.
Well, historical biology.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
By the way, I too am a big admirer and love David Berlinski.
Dude,
unfortunately, he breaks my heart because he's not a Christian.
I know.
I just have such admiration for Berlinski.
Yeah.
But it breaks my heart that he's not a Christian.
All right, sorry, James. Go ahead.
Yeah. Shut up, Charlie.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just wanted to make the point for bullet points. Abortion is child sacrifice. I'm not saying whether I agree with that or not, but would you say that abortion is murder?
Yes.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to read something from the Bible.
Yeah, I'm just going to warn you. I'm just going to warn you. I'm just going to warn you before you do. I am well prepared for this. You're not going to present to me anything that's new.
Yeah, okay? I to be honest, I'm not. Okay. I just find it funny. Okay, this one.
Yeah, Exodus. Well, you know what? Look. I'm not trying to brag, but you're making a big mistake doing what you're doing right. Because when it comes to the issue of abortion, vis-a-vis the Bible and Old Testament occurrences, I'm probably among some of the best debaters on that issue. But go ahead. I'm waiting.
Thank you. So this is from Exodus. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn Pharaoh to the firstborn of the prisoner who sat in the dungeon. That seems like killing babies to me.
Yeah, you'd be
Um,
right. Yep,
and you
yep.
got
Uh huh.
from
That's
I don't know how to
that's
pronounce
right. That's
I don't
right.
know how to
But you
pronounce
see,
it, to be
here's the
honest.
here's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, how old are you?
I am 19.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being transparent. Okay. Now
Yep.
I'm going to say it the TikTok way. Okay. It's
Right, let's hear it.
logically incoherent to say that God schmurders. God cannot commit schmurder. God schmurder is an indiscriminate human ending of human life. God does not indiscriminately end life. Okay? So the difference is this:
Um,
it is God's prerogative to operate his plan of creation and redemptive history and end some people's lives at various ages according to his plan and purpose. And nobody has an objective standard to find fault with what God administers, even though we may find it very distasteful. Okay? So God cannot logically commit schmurder.
he
Humans
cannot
can.
commit, however.
God,
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to ask
Sorry.
you a question. God can end people's lives directly or indirectly, but logically, God cannot commit schmurder. It's a logical
He, he,
incoherency.
he cannot commit. He cannot commit the murder.
Yeah,
However, it
and
does say in
schmurder,
another verse.
listen carefully. Schmurder
Yep.
is either the unethical or illegal taking of life. So, what ethical standard would God be obligated to, or what jurisdiction would God be subject to in order to arraign and try God on schmurder charges?
Well, I'm not saying he did it like directly, but
Okay,
he's
so
influenced people to
do
kill.
you understand that God cannot commit schmurder? God can end people's
Yeah.
lives at any age, but you cannot qualify it as murder because that'll be a logical incoherency.
Okay, it's not murder. However, he's still unaliving people.
That's correct. And guess what? He's going to unalive everybody on the planet too.
Yeah, but there's ethical ways to do it. You
No,
know, you don't have to kill the
Okay,
babies.
listen. This is how deceived you are. Okay, because you see, when you say there are ethical ways to do it, is God obligated to some external objective standard about how he is to run the course of human history?
Come again?
Is God obligated to conform himself to some objective ethical standard, the way in which he administers his plan of human history?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Yeah. Well, this is how you've been brainwashed. The idea that a human being can find fault with God is a form of insanity. It's literally insane to think that you could find fault with a perfect being. Now, on the other hand, if you say,
Uh,
well,
um,
if you say God is not perfect because he did this or that, I say, by what authority do you say he's not perfect?
I'd say he's not perfect as
Let's listen to me. Two of my very close
um,
loved ones.
let me speak, dude.
I want to explain something to you, then you can speak. I'm a
Okay, thank you.
Christian. I'm a Christian theist.
Right, okay.
Two of my very close loved ones have been afflicted with very serious medical or neurological conditions, which
I'm sorry to hear that.
is extremely grievous, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, not for one moment, not to pat myself on the back, because I've known this since I was a child. I and no one else on this planet is in a position where we can rationally find fault because certain things happen to ourselves or unloved ones that we are unhappy about or we find very distasteful within God's plan of redemption. So it is insane to find fault with a God who reveals himself as perfect and to say, well, he's not perfect because of XYZ. how would you know what would be incompatible with God being perfect if God doesn't reveal to you what would be incompatible with his plan of redemption? So you
Um,
see, it's irrational. Listen carefully. I'm going to let you speak. It is irrational to call into question whatever God does. And if you say that it is rational to call into question that anything that God does, then I will ask you one simple question and you will be required to answer it. Okay? Now,
mhm.
is there any act of God that you consider to be wrong?
Yes.
Good. By what standard?
Um, I don't know. You just
By what
ethically.
standard? By what standard does whatever God does through the course of history and his plan of redemption, what is your objective standard that God deviates from?
I don't know, man. I'm not good at big words.
No. It doesn't. What you're doing is you are exalting your human reasoning as being authoritative in making judgments about God's actions, and you're irrational when you do so.
I mean, I get where you're coming from.
Listen, like for example, God struck down the firstborn in all of Egypt. Now,
Indeed, he did.
I mean, good. So, well, guess what?
What?
Is your great great grandfather still alive?
I highly doubt it.
Right. Is everybody more than throughout history? Are they all dead except for people that are under the age of 150 or 120?
Yeah,
Are they all
yeah, but
dead?
we
No, no,
weren't
no,
all
no.
struck
Listen.
down by God. We weren't all
Okay.
struck
Well,
down
wait.
by God as an infant.
Would it make you feel better if they died by heart attacks?
And make me feel
Okay.
better if you
Is
were.
is it God's prerogative to end human life?
Uh, I don't, I don't know, man. I just
Well, if
it
you
does
don't,
seem.
wait. If you don't know, then you're in no position to make a rational adjudication that God's striking down the firstborn. And by the way, the firstborn included people of every age.
That's true. That's true.
It didn't just mean the firstborn who were 12 months old. Anybody who was
Yeah, that's a valid
firstborn
point.
was struck down. Okay.
Okay, well, why
Now,
is he striking down people who are
no, look,
firstborn? That's a little mean.
listen to me. My beloved grandfather on my father's side, he was a wonderful man. Okay, to a certain degree. Okay, he died in his late 80s, and it was very sad to me, of course, like most people when he died. Do you know
Yeah.
that two of his siblings died at a very young age? What difference does it make whether they died young or in their 80s? What difference does it make?
The difference is that one of them got to live a full life and the other didn't.
Oh, so those people who died young, did God rip them off?
I mean, I suppose
Yeah,
you can make an argument for that.
did God rip them off? Did God owe them a long life?
I mean, it's a little unfair to give some a
Don't you
fulfilled life.
understand? Don't you understand how foolish your reasoning is to impugn and indict God? All you are going to rely upon is a purely relativistic, subjective notion that you are holding God to. And relativistic and subjective notions ultimately, at the end of the day, don't mean anything.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You've probably won this one. Can I make this point? Can I make another one?
Please.
Okay. Do you think slavery is okay?
When you use the word slavery, do you mean um, forced confinement and forced servitude?
I would suppose so. That's probably the definition.
Yeah, well, the Old Testament law prohibits kidnapping and oppression. God told the Jews in the Mosaic law, do not oppress your fellow Israelites or foreigners the way you were oppressed in Egypt. How were they oppressed in
Right.
Egypt? By forced confinement and forced servitude. So in the 20th century English translation, an unfortunate choice was made to render the word Eved, which means to be a servant, as slave. Did you know that the King James Bible of 1611 never translated the word Eved, which is a neutral term meaning to act in service to another? Do you know that they never translated it slave?
I'm not trying to be rude, dude, but I didn't get to finish my point.
Go ahead. Go
Um,
ahead. Go ahead.
okay, thank you.
You're not being
Um,
rude. You're not being rude.
okay, thank you. Yeah, no, mistake me if I'm wrong, but did he not say that I think it was the Jewish people could be enslaved for 7 years,
No,
and then
no,
people who are
no,
non-Jews
sir,
could be
sir,
enslaved for the
sir.
rest of their lives and pass it on to their
You're
children?
reacting. You're reacting to the 20th century English translation. What this is referring to, do you understand that servitude can be contractually obligated and can be passed on as an inheritance? Okay? These are business arrangements that this is referring to. The idea of forced confinement and forced servitude is already prohibited by the Mosaic Law. Did you know that there's a provision in the Mosaic Law that says if somebody is acting in a service to another and they flee the person they're serving, they are not to be returned? Did you know that?
I did not.
Right. So you can't have an antebellum type of slavery. What you're reacting to is the unfortunate choice of 20th century English translations that are translating the word for servant as slave. Okay? So if
I don't know.
listen carefully. God says in the Old Testament, do not oppress your fellow Israelites or foreigners the way that you were oppressed in Egypt. Well, how were they oppressed? By forced confinement and forced servitude without the
Okay.
right of being able to leave your service. Now, I just
Well,
explained to you. So, whenever the English translations translate slave, you should not interpret the word meaning forced confinement and forced servitude unless the context is crystal clear that that's what it means.
okay, fair enough, fair enough. But what about where it says that you're allowed to beat them as long as they don't die within 1 or 2 days?
Okay, so this is another example where this is not prescribing that you are to beat your servant. It is setting a limitation that if it happens where somebody is in service to somebody else, right? And that person you're serving is called your master, just like we talk about employers. And they are to engage in corporal punishment. That if you kill them, you are to die. Now, do you understand that if somebody engages in corporal punishment of people who are acting in service to them, they have the option under Old Testament law to run away and not return, and they cannot be legally forced to come back. So
Yeah,
wouldn't it be counterproductive for somebody who has servants who may be voluntarily or contractually obligated to them to administer corporal punishment, and they can leave, and then guess what? You just lose your servant.
yeah, but why doesn't he just say don't beat your slaves and then people aren't gonna do it
Well,
because he told them not to?
it already says that you are to love your neighbor as yourself, but it doesn't strictly outlaw not capital punishment, corporal punishment. It simply is setting a regulation that if somebody were to do this and the person were severely harmed, then there'll be an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, even including death. This is not an
Yeah,
instruction. This is not a license to beat somebody.
Yeah, I know.
So see, once again, what you're reacting to are misrepresentations and mischaracterizations of aspects of the Old Testament law, while to the exclusion and ignoring other provisions of the law that shed light on this. So just think about this. The Old Testament law is very clear. If a servant flees and goes to another town or city, you are not to return that person by force. So if a master were to strike a servant for whatever reason, he is risking that person leaving their service, isn't he? So that would mean that corporal punishment on part of a master to a servant class person, right? A voluntary servant or an indentured servant, they're risking losing their servant. So that would mean that corporal punishment would be rare.
I see. Fair enough.
Yeah. So you
I'm
see,
not.
you see, what happens is atheists come and they cherry pick stuff out of the Old Testament without properly contextualizing the passages in question as they are in the Old Testament. Okay.
I mean, I still think they could have just said, "Don't beat your slaves at all." But
No,
fair enough.
it was no, certain, sir. Listen to me. First of all, do you understand the difference um, between beating and corporal punishment? A beating would be considered
Allegedly, you're lying
a
according to the reading the
beating.
comments.
Listen to me. A beating would be a severe form of punishment. The Old Testament law, okay, already provides for punishment if another person harms another. The law provides for that, even including servants.
Okay.
It's simply pointing out that if a master does beat their servant and they die, they're to receive the death penalty.
Okay. Well, I don't
Otherwise,
know if this is true.
otherwise,
Well, no,
otherwise, there's going to be civil penalties for a severe beating if the person doesn't flee. Now, how many people who have servants are going to make the decision to beat their servants knowing that they are free to legally leave and never come back?
Repeat that. Sorry.
Yeah. So you see, what you have picked up on are these lame atheist attacks that are
Okay.
taking
Fair
biblical
enough.
statements out of context. Does not the Old Testament law clearly say you are to love your neighbor as yourself? So if you're going to discipline
Fair enough.
somebody, if you're going to discipline somebody in a variety of ways, right? Even if a parent administers corporal punishment. You see, the Bible sanctions corporal punishment by parents to children, but it doesn't sanction per se a beating that would be beyond, what we would consider corporal punishment and would be fitting for a
Fair enough.
child. Okay, and the same is
Right.
true
Yeah.
with
Yeah. I get
masters
that.
and servants.
Okay. Yeah. I get that. If I could just make a point, please. I don't know how true this is because there's no source or anything. But someone in the comments says that they were allowed to take people from surrounding lands as slaves as well. Just not sure how true that is, but I just want to hear your opinion on it.
Well, you're going to have to give me the exact verse. You could acquire servants from other lands. Sure. Yeah, you can
It's
you can
just
get.
business terminology. We have
Yeah.
foreign and domestic
Yeah,
workers. Like,
yeah, we have that in the United States as well. You can get it. You can get a temporary work visa from another country. You can have people coming into the country who have work visas. It's just
I feel
simply
like this is
saying.
a little
You
different.
see, look. Do you understand the big mistake that critics are making is because they're focusing on the English translation of the word slave, and they're refusing to investigate or even understand that the underlying word simply means a servant, either of a voluntary or a contractual basis, and that if they're going to say that the word servant means forced captivity and forced service, they're going to have to show it from the context. Okay? But atheists
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
never go in to the relevant contextual information. It is completely ignored, with rare exceptions, about the context. So
Well,
when
they're
it
not
says,
passed down from generation to.
so when it says you can pass on your servants as property to your children, it's simply pointing out that if somebody is contractually obligated to serve another, that contractual service can be
Like
passed on to the children if the master dies. Let's say
like
somebody's
I'll give an
suppose
example. Let me give an example. Jerry Buss unalived, and his daughter Jeannie Buss inherited the Lakers. So she inherited all the contracts of the players of the team. That's all it's going
and
on.
anarcho-chemists, come up and explain how I'm lying. Because if you don't come up and explain, you're going to get muted. Come on up, anarcho-chemist.
Yeah, you seem a lot more educated than
Yeah,
me.
okay,
Please
so
join.
let's see. So we have anarcho-chemist saying I'm lying. Let's see if he has the balls to come up and back up that I'm lying. Oh, look at that, folks. He's not coming up. Bye-bye, anarchist chemist.
Oh, come on, dude, join. Oh, it's a
Yeah.
shame.
So people shoot their mouths off in the text chat because they for the most part, they're not going to come up on stage. So the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is this: the skeptics are capitalizing on the unfortunate choice to use the word slave. So when you read the word slave, you need to understand that it's the word eved. And the word eved is neutral. Only the context can indicate whether it's a forced captivity. Do you know the word for wine in the Old Testament is yayin? Okay? The word
Okay.
yayin is used in certain verses where it's unequivocally clear to refer to unfermented grape juice. In other passages, it's unequivocally clear that it's referring to a fermented squeezed grape juice. Okay?
Okay.
So you see, to sit there and say that the word wine in the Old Testament and in the New Testament always refers to a fermented juice of the grape that's been preserved is a false conclusion. In the same way, when you read the English word slave, you're thinking of slavery as it occurred in the antebellum South. The word slave in the English simply, you see, this is the problem. We wouldn't be having this problem today if 20th century translators continued with what the King James translators translated. They always translated it servant. The
I
critics are
see.
capitalizing on the choice of an English translation. I don't know if it's Hungarian, but I might be mistaken about their word for servant is Slav.
Oh,
Okay, now
right.
because of the upheaval that we had in antebellum slavery, the word slavery is totally associated with forced captivity and servitude. Likewise, somebody said to me, Darth, do you drink alcohol? I said, no. They go, not a drop? No. You don't even drink beer? I go, oh, I drink some beer. But wait a minute, you just told me you drink alcohol. Yeah, I drink root beer and birch beer. Beer is a term refers to a brewed beverage. Okay? And it's in our modern era, it's associated with alcohol, with being alcoholic or fermented. Do you know that you can buy non-alcoholic beer?
Yeah, I
Do you
did
know
know
that
that.
did you know you can buy non-alcoholic wine?
I did.
If you go into any liquor stores, which I don't, but you can buy unfermented wine. You can buy unfermented beer. Okay?
Yeah.
So the fact it may be common within a particular historical socio-cultural context that a word conveys the idea of one thing rather than another. So as long as you understand that whenever somebody cites the word slave, the critics who bring this up, like on TikTok and other platforms, they're not telling their audience, nor have they investigated, nor do they care, that this is just a generic term meaning servant. And only the context of any given passage can determine whether it's voluntary servitude, contractual servitude, or forced captivity and forced servitude.
I see.
Okay, so let me put it this way. In ancient times, according to the Old Testament, if somebody was contractually obligated to somebody for, let's say, 4 years, right? Remember, they had no welfare programs. And this is a way of helping people. So let's say somebody is contractually obligated to serve somebody for 4 years, for whatever reason, for welfare reasons or even to pay off a debt. Let's say 2 years go by and the master dies. That contractual obligation, the remaining 2 years, according to Old Testament law, is passed on to the inheritors. That's what it's referring to. When it uses the word possession, you have to look at the underlying Hebrew. It's not referring to possessing slaves like it did in the antebellum South. It means you own their contractual obligation for service in whatever remaining time they're obligated.
All right, yeah, fair enough.
Yep.
Right,
So
well,
you see,
it was.
there's going to be a lot of people on Judgment Day when they stand before the great white throne judgment before Jesus Christ, who they're going to be beyond embarrassed because they impugned, slandered, and defamed the God of the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Beyond stupidly, when they could have just sat there and investigated, going, "Gee, I wonder what the underlying word for slave is." They're just reacting to the English translation slave, and that's what they're building their case on. Sounds colossally stupid to me.
I mean, I personally don't believe in it, but fair enough. I get what you're saying.
You don't believe in what?
I don't believe in like God and Christianity.
What's
So
your
which
rational basis to say that there's no God?
I don't think there's any evidence, and I think there's more evidence that
Okay.
isn't
So
there.
this is what we hear 99% of the time. Can you please defend the statement there's no evidence for God?
Well, there could be evidence. I don't know of any evidence.
No. Stop. Oh, okay. Okay, ready? So you know what you just did? You said God doesn't
Well,
exist because I don't know.
well, from what I've seen, yeah, from what,
No, you just
when I
told
don't
me.
know,
No, you
can I
said
make my point?
you believe that there's no God, right?
Yeah, because I haven't seen any evidence.
Right. Okay. But you told me, you said there. So then you believe that what you do see is to be categorized as independent from God, correct?
Sure.
Good. What's the evidence for that?
Bro, but I can't lie. It's
Sir,
really late.
listen to me carefully. I'm not going to let you off the hook.
Right.
You said there's no evidence for God, but you've decided
Yeah.
that these things are to be reckoned or categorized as being independent of God. What is the evidence for that categorization? Okay. What's the evidence for that?
I don't even know what that means, bro.
Well, you told me there's no evidence that things depend and derive from a God. So then you must
Right.
have
Yeah.
evidence that things don't depend upon God. Is that correct?
Um. I guess. Well, you're asking like the evidence that is not
So
real. Or
notice how you people are very bold to say, "Oh, I don't believe in God because there's no evidence for God." But then when I ask you to justify your statement, "There's no evidence for God," you turn into babbling fools.
because I don't understand what you're saying.
You
Also, I
told
have
me
a.
there's no evidence for God. I want you to defend the statement. So what you're doing right now is
Yeah.
you're going from saying that the world is not indicative of God to saying, "Oh, I don't know what the world ultimately derives from." Is that your position?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't.
So God, so then your position is God does not exist because I don't know what the origin of the world is. Does that make sense?
I guess.
No, it doesn't. To sit there and say
Well,
God. So, do you know what the word indeterminate means?
I do. Yeah.
Suppose you were sick and you got a blood test and you called the
Hmm.
doctor and you spoke with them on the phone. Was it positive or negative, the results on the test, doctor? And the doctor says it's indeterminate. Okay, you understand that?
Yeah.
So, are you telling me God does not exist because the world is indeterminate of its origin?
Well, I think it's very different to a blood test.
Answer the question. Are you asserting that God does not and cannot exist because the ultimate origin of the world is indeterminate,
I'm not
not
saying
determined?
I'm not saying he cannot exist. I'm
No,
saying that
no.
obviously
Now
there
you're
is a
changing your tune.
that,
You see this? Okay,
no,
we're
I'm
done.
not.
We're done. Thank you.
No,
Thank you
let me
for
speak.
wasting my time.
No,
No,
let
you're done. You're done. You see, notice again the shape shifting from the denial of God to, oh, I'm unconvinced of God's existence. Notice this bait and switch that they pull all the time. They'll deny God and say, well, God doesn't exist because there's no evidence for God. But then when you ask them to defend that statement, they can't defend it. And then it's, oh, golly shucks, I'm just unconvinced. They shapeshift from the denial of God to I'm unconvinced of God's existence.
I think I should probably end this because if I don't, I'm gonna fall asleep before.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to bed too.
Okay, thanks for coming.
Yeah, yeah.
No, you
Good night, everyone.
Charlie, I hope that smirk clears up.
Yeah,
I'll work on that, Darth.
what the hell's wrong with you, Charlie?
Yeah. Shut up, Charlie.
I don't know, but to show you that I'm a loving Christian, I put up with Charlie.
Is that your weekly penance?
Yeah. Let's keep that between you and me.
Okay. Good night, Darth.
Good night, Charlie.